Today we're talking about solving equations. Anytime we're going to solve an equation, we want to get the variable by itself. That's our ultimate goal. So in this first example, we see that we need to solve for a. One thing you might want to do is circle a, just to remind you that that's our goal, to get that variable by itself. So before we do that, we have to get that term by itself. So we're going to get rid of this 2. And like we've already talked about earlier in the year, if it's helpful, go ahead and draw this line under the equal sign. And just remember, anything you do to one side of that line, you have to do to the other side of that line. So I'm going to subtract 2 from both sides. And I get 4 equals a divided by 4. Now, I want to get rid of this fraction, so I'm going to do the opposite of division, and I'm going to multiply both sides by 4. And in doing that, the 4's divide out over here, and we're just left with a. I highly recommend to check your answer. So let's do a quick check. Anytime you do a check, we're going to start with the original equation. And when you do a check, you should not move anything from one side of the equal sign to the other. We're just going to write it exactly as is. We're going to substitute what we got for a. And 16 divided by 4 is 4. And we see that it does in fact check. Don't forget to pause if you need to. I'm going to keep going. Here's example 2. So right now on the left side of this equation, we have a fraction. And so what I'm going to do is get rid of this fraction by multiplying by the denominator, just like we did in the last problem. So I'm going to multiply both sides by 3, and that's going to eliminate this denominator, and we're just left with b plus 9 on the left and 24 on the right. Again, if drawing that line under the equal sign helps, go ahead and do that. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that in class. So we get v is equal to 15. And again, we're going to check. So we're going to start with the original equation. And I'm just going to substitute what we got for v. And just bring everything down in every line of the check. So I get 24 divided by 3, which is 8, and it checks out. In the next example, we're going to use what we call the distributive property. Hopefully you've heard that term before. We're going to go over properties pretty in detail this year, but the distributive property takes the number in front and multiplies it to every term inside the parentheses. So this is going to be 2n plus 10 equals negative 2, and then I'm just going to go from here. So my first object in this particular example is to get rid of the parentheses, and in doing that, I'm going to use the distributive property. So that got rid of the parentheses, which is what we want. Here's the variable we want by itself. If it helps, circle it. And I need to get this term by itself first, so I'm going to get rid of this 10. So I'm adding the 10 to 2n. I'm going to do the opposite of addition. I'm going to subtract that 10 from both sides. I have 2n equals negative 12. And then right now I'm multiplying the 2 by the n, so I'm going to do the opposite of multiplication, which is division. I'm dividing both sides by 2. So n equals negative 6. Let's do the check. Starting with the original equation always. I'm going to substitute in for the variable. And I'm going to follow order of operations. So I'm going to do what's in the grouping. This time the grouping is parentheses. I'm going to do what's in that first. So I get negative 2 equals negative 2. So it checks out. So you see it doesn't take too long to do the check. And it's always a good idea just to make sure you didn't miss any steps. Here's the last example I'm going to have you try on your own. Don't forget to do the check at the end, and we will continue this in class.